welcome to a brand new episode of New World Seder. On the show today, I have the honor to be talking to Ben Hilleli. I like how you just did that thing with your eyes. Listen, you are one of those people that talks a lot on the internet. You definitely get yourself involved in many conversations relating to Israel or Judaism. I know you yourself have many different ideas. You don't necessarily lean to the left or lean to the right. But you do come with various opinions that are very motivating for the Jewish people. So whether it's again right or left, it doesn't matter. It reaches a point where people can have dialogue. Today, I'm going to have you on the show to really talk about the rise of anti-Semitism or we could call it the New Age anti-Semitism, that is no longer surrounding just the word Jew, but it's surrounding the word Israel or the word Zionist. Is there something that you're noticing online or on the streets when it comes to the New Age anti-Semitism? Like, are you noticing the new language or how people are actually getting away with it these days?
It seems like there's a general sensitivity, that came from the left. So you can't say certain things, right? You can't even say that only women can have babies. Right? So people are more, they seem to choose their words more. So you're not a dirty kike anymore. We just, disagree with Israel's policies. We're just against Zionism. And how it manifests itself at the end of the day, though, why is it anti-Semitism? Is because they kind of hold Israel to kind of to a standard they don't hold anybody else to. Israel will, in defensive action, somebody will die, and it'll be labeled, like a massacre. Where was it going? Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
You're talking about how Israel is sort of getting at this double standard, right?
Yeah, right.
What I want to really talk about is the anti-Semitism part, where in some ways, people that are saying anti-Israel stuff are saying, well, I'm against the government, I'm not against the people. And I hear that often, and sometimes I could see where some would say that. But
yes,
people, you could see that there is a borderline anti-Semitism, and it's not just the government. So if you can,
it's much more difficult to confront because, especially for me, listen, I very, very much value free speech, very, very much. Like, one thing where I do get into disagreements with other Jews is when the Nazis come to the universities, or when somebody with, like, David Icke, wackadoo, who amongst many other beliefs, I think doesn't like Jews. He also believes in reptilian humanoids and all these things. And I see a lot of Jews like, we need to silence this guy. We need to get him off Twitter. We need to get him deplatformed. And that I disagree with. You can't silence, right? You can't silence these people. You can't tell them like that opinion isn't valid. So it's a little bit harder to deal with than the overt kind of Jewish conspiracy to take over the world. The old anti-Semitism.
Right.
I don't think those people should be silenced. I think they should have everybody should have a platform and should be allowed to have their say.
But are you saying that everyone should have a say? I mean, if you're out in the street, so for example, we have El Quds Day in Canada, which is a day that basically celebrates, anti-Semitism. Let's be honest. Let's call it what it is. All right, it's anti-Jewish, anti-Israel. Nothing positive comes out of it. It's hatred, bigotry, racism, whatever you want to call it. And when you start to spew this type of information out to the public, and you're seeing that Hezbollah flags, Hamas flags, and basically terrorist flags, doesn't that sort of pass the line of freedom of speech? Because then why don't we just not have Nazis on the street? Because the word Nazi resonates with something historic that was negative. I mean, you can look into the future and say these are new Nazis.
It's a really tough question because it's always a question of, kind of sound cliche, but where do you draw the line? Like, at what point does, for me, the line is, so long as you're not inciting violence, and by incite, that's a difficult one too. Incitement. I mean, I could say something very bad about people, and you go out and do it, and you go out and kill them. Is that me inciting you? I mean, for me, it's so long as you're not overtly doing a call to action, like let's go out and kill these people, you should have the right to say those things. I hate that Al-Quds Day. I've been out there, but I think being out there and confronting them, words versus words, is the way to confront it. When you silence them, listen, it's very easy when you're talking about Nazis, when you're talking about the guys you hate the most, when everybody's agreeing, yeah, silence them. But then what happens with things here? Israel's a great an example, like where I don't know, there's certain historical things where like the Palestinians can make a point that's kind of factual, and the Israelis can make a point that's kind of factual, and it's like, when does it become a hate crime, right? But when who decides when you could say something and when you can't? I think the gender thing is something that keeps coming up. People don't understand why it's important. It's important to me because, like, there are people now who have gotten in trouble for not using certain pronouns, right? Jordan Peterson case was famous for that. That scares the crap out of me. Like, I'd rather have everybody talking. I'd rather have the dialogue, even when it's offensive, even when it makes me sick, even when it turns my stomach, than to silence people.
But the point that you're bringing up right now is, I'm not talking about silencing people. I'm not talking about, having people get away from dialogue. But clearly, we're not having dialogue when it's basically a hate fest. Like, if you take a look at what's happening on college campuses today, you're seeing, like, for example, Apartheid Week. So you're seeing a day that's dedicated to be anti-Israel. If they were there to promote Palestinian history, whether I agree with it or not, culture,
Right.
if they were there to talk about, the problems that they're facing, I'll be on that. And I believe that some of their claims are legitimate. I mean, we can definitely have a discussion about it. But it's not that. And its main goal is to try and bring other people down. So when you have an Israel Fest, you have a day where we celebrate Israel. We don't even talk about the Arabs. We don't talk about all the enemies that we had. We don't really talk about the Holocaust during those times. We talk about positive things.
We talk about terrorism too. We bring that. We definitely bring that up, and that's part of it.
Depends on the conversation. Depends. Meaning, if we're having a dialogue when we're talking about terrorism, like just today in the news, a Golani, a person who's fighting in the north, got a rock thrown at him and killed him. And
on his head.
We're looking at, they're just rocks. No, have you ever received a stone against your head? Like, people should not be going through this. So you can have these discussions, but what I'm saying is whenever you're seeing Jewish people put events together, or pro-Israel people, it's not to demonize the Palestinian people. It's not to even bring them up in conversation. And yet anything that is Palestinian or relating to that region, it becomes into an Israel hate fest. And through that, and when people are listening to it, they see Israel as this enemy, which is far from the truth in terms of what they're doing. But it's not creating dialogue. It's just creating more hatred. If you were to say, let's have dialogue, let's bring people into a hall, let's have a discussion. But whenever that happens, we never have these types of conversations. It's always silencing someone, right? Like, there was a soldier that came out to York University not long ago. He was going to talk about what was happening in Syria and how humanitarily they were helping the Syrians that were in. And so it had nothing to do with the conflict, and yet they didn't even allow this person to speak. I'm completely against that. So they always try to shut them down. So if it's about dialogue, I'm all about that. But we're talking about where it sort of crosses the line, or do you feel like it never really crosses the line as long as it's under free speech?
Listen, I don't have to like it. But like, where's the line? Like, so where's if you draw the line, like where's the line? Like, what is constructive dialogue? Like, what is the criteria for constructive dialogue? Right? If I'm saying something that, like, if we're actually hashing out a controversial issue, I'm going to say things that offend you, and you're going to say things that offend me if we're actually, getting at the heart of the issue, right? And we're going to disagree. So where's the line? Like, when does it become a hate fest, and when is it? And I don't know where that is. Like, just like the soldier getting prevented from talking. Like, it bothers me that, like, right-wing speakers in the States are getting are getting sorry, universities are getting like firebombed and stuff. I think Ben Shapiro had to pay like millions of dollars to speak. Like, that's crazy. He's the most benign guy. He's this little shrimp, but he's the most, his views are so benign.
What I'd like to ask you though is, do you see that there is sort of like a double standard? And what I mean by the double standard is that if someone from the left would go out and talk, we almost have to allow them to speak their mind, and we use freedom of speech. And many a times we're seeing someone from the right speaking, it's almost like everything they're saying is racist, and we use all these big words to try and bring them down. Do you see that there is a double standard when it comes to the left and the right on this issue?
I think lately, and it's going to sound kind of partisan. I don't get what's going on with the left. It's really become, well, both sides have become really polarized, right? But the left's become, it seems like, all about emotions, and you can't. I agree with you. You can't have a dialogue anymore. It's when you're talking, it almost seems like it's less about what you're saying, and almost kind of like sitting there like, gotcha. Like right. This morning, what Trump said, go ask China, and the reporter happened to be Asian. So why are you saying that to me? And then all morning they're talking about how he could have sent it to you. It had nothing to do with the reporter.
Right.
That bothers me a lot. And the words, you're right. It's the racist word immediately comes out. The transphobic thing comes out, and more than just silencing people, I worry that you're defanging these terms. It's like the boy who cried wolf. If everybody's a racist, right? If you're using that word on a daily basis for every single view that doesn't go with you, that you don't agree with, when you eventually need to call somebody a real racist, like the real racist you actually have to be concerned with, the guys who want to annihilate people, not the guys who want to make some racist jokes.
But how do we differentiate between the two? I mean, I was watching a documentary the other day on the Hitler's goons, like his sort of like the party that was working with him, from Goebbels to and what I noticed about it was that when they started off, they weren't really spewing the anti-Jewish stuff. They were anti-establishment. They were sort of like the rights of the German people. We shouldn't, feel defeated after the Versailles, signage. So what I felt was that, they seemed in some ways human. I mean, clearly there was some madness behind it, but they were using free speech
as always scary,
trying to get the people behind them. And then the reality came because people knew what they were doing through their actions, like Kristallnacht. Or when they were beating up Jews on the streets, or the different pogroms that were going on, and people were ignoring them. They're saying, no, these are just some of the fanatics. And by the way, if you watch that documentary, you have Hitler punishing one of his main people because the guy who was in charge of the SA, because they were being too violent on the streets and they were causing problems where, when it came to politics, Hitler wasn't taken too seriously because of it. So he was very much worried.
They were thugs. The brown shirts early on were thugs. Listen. I think they always espouse the anti-Semitism. If you read Mein Kampf, I read that long time. I read it a few times actually. I don't know why. Really, really weird, drawn-on book. Like, he wasn't a talented author. But
it was written by him and Hess. They both wrote it together.
I think he wrote it in jail.
Yeah, they wrote it. Yeah, so Hess wanted to be in jail with Hitler because he was loving him so much. They decided to write it together, but Hitler got the credit because Hitler was the main person behind it. And a lot of their ideas were anti-Semitic, but what they were doing is they were just drawing this picture between the Jew and everyone else because they felt, and I'll tell you this, as a Jew, it somewhat made sense to me. I can understand. I read Mein Kampf, and I'll tell you what I'm talking about. Now, again,
the parts about being rats and cockroaches and all that stuff.
No, we're not.
So much about.
No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about sort of like the breakdown of it being where the Jewish people care about the afterlife. They don't really care so much about the life itself. Like, meaning you do good here and you get a great afterlife. And that's what it talked about in Mein Kampf, sort of describing the Jew and the spiritual.
One of many things, yeah.
But there were some parts that he was talking about that was going in towards that direction. But what he was doing, he was manipulating it by saying, well, we're the strongest, we're the pure, and we'll take care of them. And the truth is, the whole idea of Aryans and all that came much, much after. They were just blaming Jews, just like they were blaming the Bolsheviks, and they were blaming like everyone else that wasn't.
Populism. It's populism 101. Find an elite, blame all your issues for it,
Exactly.
and be the guy that stamps it down. You see that in U.S. politics now too.
And that's the
Like
thing.
where,
When I'm watching this type of documentary, I really feel like we're hitting a particular time where, it's history is sort of repeating itself. And I know people have been saying it for a long time, but just today,
Yeah.
in the news, or yesterday in the news, apparently the Western Ukraine, the new Gestapos, are going out and trying to find out, all the names of all the Jews living in that area. And when you think, wait a second, the president of Ukraine happens to be a Jew. And, this thing happened in Belgium not long ago. And in France, they were trying to do this. So it's coming to a point where we don't know. Like, I mean, you have in Israel, but we still, whether this is an anti-Semitic, this is anti-Israel, anti-Zionist,
I hate the cliche that it's 1933 again, because people seem to use that all the time. It's one of those things that just eye roll. But
I'm one of those that has to look at it in that way.
But it's like I find myself kind of like I find myself like having the exact same thought. It's like, okay, so they made this list, but like, what do we really know? And yeah, he's Jewish. And then it happens it happened in Belgium, and like, and then it's like, this is exactly what my grandfather's family, I don't mean to laugh, but this is exactly what my grandfather's family went through. It's like, like they stopped us from going to school. Yeah, like they stopped us from doing businesses. Yeah, they collected this thing, but like, we've been here forever. Like, it's Poland, man. Like, we've been here
But I think you just contradicted yourself. Because a second ago you said, I don't see it as like, oh, I hate when people say it's back to 1933.
Oh, no. Yeah. But I said, but.
Yeah.
I don't usually like it. I don't like it. I don't like the overuse of it. I'm saying though, here there are some parallels.
Yeah.
And I catch myself kind of going like, come on, it's just another. But that's exactly what my 2 generations ago. That's exactly what they did. We have a business. We've been here forever. Come on. Really?
What about okay, so you're in France and you're seeing people who wear yarmulkes, right? Which is the Jewish hat or whatever you want to call it for the audience. It's not Jewish, and it's just a symbol of somebody being Jewish, just like a Star of David today. And people are being beaten up for wearing those types of clothes. There's something to be said about that, and this is new. It's been happening for a very long time. If you take a look at Israel's new population, how many people from France and Argentina have made it to Israel over the last 15 years, you'd be shocked to see the numbers.
Yeah, no, I know.
So there is a new anti-Semitism that's happening right now. But do you believe that Israel is really to blame, or is this like the new scapegoat? Because before, and again, watching the documentary and learning about it, the Germans at the beginning were not about to murder the Jews. That was not their main goal.
One of many goals.
Wanted to rid of them. They didn't see them as pure people. Go back to where you came from. Go back to Palestine. Go back to your area. And then when all of a sudden they had 2 million people in ghetto, and then they said, well, what do we do with them? We're like, well, remember that experiment we tried with the Polish people, the Polish soldiers? Let's just bring in the Jews there and get them to work for us.
Yeah, they didn't want any undesirables. I think at the end of the day, they would have, if he'd gotten his way with the Jews, he would have gone on to the Russians and to his Arab allies too, and he would have gotten rid of everybody except for the master race.
So what do we do today? So what do we do today to stand up to this brand new anti-Semitism? Because Nazi, it plays a serious role in our minds, and we hear it right away negative. But at the same time, they're not necessarily Nazis, because being a Nazi was, a particular ideology. It's a regime. And now you have, different governments that are in power, some right, some left, that are spewing their garbage to the people. And, listen, the scare that we just had with Corbyn in the UK. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
in the UK is not France, it's not Belgium.
No, no, no.
That's pretty scary. So how do you
Yes, it is.
stop it? What can we, as the Jewish people or anyone that does not want to see another Holocaust come to place, what is it you think we can do?
So before I say what we can do, something I often repeat is that anti-Semitism is the one thing that never goes out of style. It transcends time, transcends geography, it transcends politics. If you look throughout history, it seems to be, like I like to joke about it, it's the great uniter. It's the one thing that everybody seems to agree on, is that the Jews suck. And it seems like when situations get bad, it gets worse. I've always felt like it's always kind of there. And when things get bad, or when the political situation makes it more, in vogue to be able to express it, it's expressed. But it seems to me like it never really goes away. And this is long before the Holocaust, long before, like, to the pogroms and to the blood libels. And it's
Okay, well, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. But right now we have a state of Israel that's protecting us. So some of this
right.
rhetoric will continue to go on. But now we can defend ourselves. We have an IDF. It doesn't matter, what they say about it.
Yes, what do we do?
We move towards the 21st century. We help anybody. Like, we're big in humanitarian aid.
Yeah.
Just, a video came out of Canada sending supplies. Israel sending supplies to Canada for COVID-19. There is so many amazing things, and people don't really want to hear it yet. We, on the Israel side, are sending these messages. We go out and we talk in Israel's behalf, and we try to say, but right now is they're never really going to like us, so it doesn't matter. But what can we do to make that shift? Because it doesn't matter if we do good, we're still looked at as bad. What I want to say is that, is it now shifted towards Israel as opposed to the Jews? Is it now every time Israel does something wrong, the Jewish people feel it? Because in New York, the situation that's happening right now with, the divide between the religious and the secular that we're seeing, due to the media, it's creating more confrontation, but there's still that bottom line hatred towards Jewish people, whether it's religious or non-religious. So we should be able to come together and see that and express our views against the haters of Judaism and haters of Israel. But what is that we can do to really minimize the hatred, like in Parliament or, in places that really can make a difference?
That is a very difficult question, and I've pondered it for a while. You see a lot of people on social media go, yeah, we need to rise up, we need to get together, we need to show them. And it's like, there's 15 million of us. I don't know if a lot of Jews are cognizant of that. We're not even in the top 10 of world religions anymore. Like, we're tiny. We're a rounding error compared to the Christians and the Muslims. So that's not really an option. I think the outreach and the education and the response has to continue. I think Israel made a mistake in the early years of not doing more hasbara, of not doing more outreach. Calling little things, even like allowing the West Bank to be the West Bank rather than Judea and Samaria. Things like that. Allowing it to be called occupied when technically occupied requires another country to be there. I don't want to go on a tangent there, but I think that might have helped, on one side.
But
on the other, on the other.
But what you're saying right now is that, the same thing that I've been saying, like, if we would have fixed this, it would have made it, they would have made a difference.
Right. On the other hand, so I used to go, I spend way too much time arguing with like the real haters, like I used to go into the Arab chat groups and the anti-Israel chat groups. And because I had this naive belief that there's a certain population out there that are just misinformed, and if you give them the right information, they'll see the light and go, oh, wait a minute. Especially if you go into depth and they realize, what you're talking about, rather than, the buzzwords and usual superficial shit that you hear on the news. And there are a few, but in my old age now, I realize that it's not the lack of, with the vast majority of those people, it's not for the lack of information. And I don't know if I'm defeated, jaded, or what, but I, I, I no longer do that because,
Well, I think it's an unwinnable fight, in my opinion, because you're really arguing with the other side, but you're not really arguing. This is not a debate. It's not going anywhere. It's just a place to throw out ideas. But in reality, like, I don't think we should be combating the Arab side, the Palestinian side when it comes to this. We should just be informing the 80%, which is those that don't know any better, about the facts on the ground. So we know, like, there's a lot of people say, oh, stop using anti-Semitism, stop using anti-Zionism. But it's like, no, but you have to. If you don't continue to say it, then people will completely ignore it because the other side is crying wolf on a regular basis. Now, we're not here to really cry wolf. Look, after World War II, we did not go out to coffee shops and blew up Germans. We didn't go on and murder Germans, even though we knew they had blood on their hands, even though we knew they let everything happen. Same thing with the Polish people and the Czechoslovakian people and Norwegian people. We could have done all of that, but no, we decided to move forward and build a state and take care of ourselves. So the truth of the matter is, we are not like the other side, but in some ways we have some responsibility when it comes to educating the public, educating people about the truths of the world, as opposed to just, the snippets of information that
you're getting superficial
on news.
That's it. Yeah, it seems a lot of people. Yeah, it's the superficial. Israel uses guns to shoot at little Arab boys with rocks. And that's what I was talking about. I think Israel should have. And again, I don't know if it would have helped, but I think, especially as I was growing up, I don't remember as many opposing voices, right? Like that was the narrative. Like it was Israeli guys with big black guns against little kids with rocks. And like, even me, like, I remember I came to here when I was like 6 years old. I remember believing this shit. And until my dad was like, those aren't rocks. Like, they're throwing boulders. And until my brothers were in the army, I didn't really understand it either. And I'm like, dude, like, I'm from like a Zionist family, So I think that, but again, I don't know that would have convinced everybody. I don't think we need to convince everybody, but I think that.
What do you feel? I'm going to give you a little bit of a challenging question here. What do you feel we should be doing? Because clearly we cannot really change the minds of the anti-Israel or the anti-Semite. We cannot go out and change their minds. It doesn't matter what I'll do, right? It's almost like if I tell you right now, I have a friend to introduce to you, very nice guy, treats dog very nicely, treats his wife very nicely, has a garden and gives fruits to everybody in the neighborhood. Oh yeah, by the way, he's a Nazi. You don't care about the other stuff, right? I use the word. And now it's sort of like the Jewish people and Israel sort of has this like Nazi word that's connected to them. And yet the other side, which is causing the terrorism, and you're looking at like Arab countries killing each other, whether it's Sunni or Shiite, or whether it's this person didn't wear his hijab, or that girl,
Palestinian Authority is enough.
Whatever it may be. So my question is, what is it that we can really do in order to make sure here in the diaspora that anti-Semitism doesn't get to a point of what we had in Europe? Now, I'm not here to say that another Holocaust will happen, but it could happen. And it could happen in silence, and it could happen in a different way. If someone like a Corbyn in office, or I'm going to say something that might not be popular among the crowd, but if Bernie Sanders, even though he's a Jew, would have been in power, I think we would have had other problems.
He's going to have democratic gulags.
What do you feel that we can do or should do to protect our people?
Wow. I think we have to counter the narrative, and continue to be active in this way. I remember in college I was much more active in things like this, and it kind of felt like, are we doing anything? But right now I do realize that it does require just an army of people who know their stuff and can confront the misinformation calmly and with facts. And that's the easiest. That's very difficult. I know that's very difficult, especially when you listen, especially when it often, even when you come in with good intentions, it often descends into, throwing lines at each other.
But you mentioned before that the main problem that Israel had is hasbara, which is the explanation. And
Yeah.
what we tend to do on a regular basis is almost present these facts to people who are not ready to hear the facts. And yet you have the other side who are saying, no justice, no peace, Palestine will be free, right? So they
Yes.
have these quotes, they have these amazing things. And on our side, we're like, well, read this book and find out that this wasn't really this and that. And then you get to a point where it's like, people don't want to listen to this, right? People don't want to hear that.
This is Mein Kampf, right? The whereas it seems like a lot of people like superficiality, or like knowing a very, very, very little about a lot, right? Versus knowing a lot about a little bit less. That's something I don't get. I like depth, bookworm. And the world is complicated. Now, contrary to popular belief, the world is much more complicated than polarized lines would have you believe. So, I mean, how do you solve that? How do you raise attention spans? I don't know. But the Hasbara, the countering the narrative on social media, on the news, on all these places, has to continue to happen. I think for the longest time, Israel thought that because we were in the right and because we knew we were doing right, that's enough. But it's not. It's like, if a tree falls, or if you fell a tree and nobody hears you, nobody saw you do it, did you really do it? Israel has that problem. Like for us, it's always, for me and you, that Israel is it's central to our lives. It's tiny. You sometimes forget this dinky little, tiny little dot on the map for so many people, and their opinions are important.
Right, but when you're looking at things like the Haiti earthquake that happened, and Israel was, the first responder there with like a full,
Yeah.
they went full force. I mean, Haitian people were naming their kids Israel, new
Yeah.
babies, because of the amount of help. But the information that came out, afterwards was like, oh yeah, of course Israel was there. They were there to take, the body parts to make money off of it, on the black market. And then they found that there was one person who had this operation, and the next thing you know, well, there you go. There's Israel. There's your big. We told you so. And people completely forgot about all the money that we put in and all the hard work. And this is something we do continuously because we don't just care for our people, right? We believe in tikkun olam, which is helping the entire world, right? Fixing as much as we can. How can we get that message across that we are not the enemies of the world? Is there a way to make sure that, anytime we see anti-Semitism, we're able to call it, and it's not just a one-way street? So, for example, everybody's trying to boycott Israel. It's like they're not boycotting North Korea, not boycotting China. I mean, the real enemies, or Iran or whatnot. Israel is the name. How do we come up with a plan that we can educate the world and let them know, hey, we're not as bad as we think we are?
Yeah, no, you're right. I think contact helps. Like, I think a lot of Arabs, so like Arabs in Israel get to be amongst Jews, right? They see them, they see they don't have horns, and they say, I know, yes, there are some, obviously. So the Arabs see that the Jews are people just like them, right? They live among us. You might not like them, but that proximity, that sharing of life, it tends to kind of, I think, dissolve these some of these, like, the craziest narratives. I think a lot of Arabs, like, I think a big problem in the Arab world is that the Arab world is so homogeneous now, right? All the Jews they're not there anymore, right? The million Sephardic Jews came to Israel.
No one to blame anymore, basically. Like, they can't.
It's not just no one to blame.
Bring them back.
It's not just no one to blame. It's they don't know what a Jew is, right? So funny story. My dad said when they were, like, during the war in Egypt, he said when they had Egyptian POWs, one of the jokes was that, like, they heard them saying in Arabic that, like, where do they keep the tails? They were wondering where the Jews kept the tails. And, like, when I first heard this, I was like what? I've heard this from several people. Like, it's true. It's because, but they never saw what a Jew is, right? So you're told again and again and again, you know, like it's a big thing. Like you probably picture a monster here. Like in my son's class, there's this kid who makes more trouble than the others. And my son's always coming home telling me the stories about this girl, 6 years old, right? And then he brought the class picture home, right? And I'm looking at it, and dude, I saw this little, like, I don't know what I was expecting to see, dude. I think I was expecting to see like somebody with like green skin, horns, teeth out, things. It was a 6-year-old girl. You know what I mean? The proximity, seeing them as human, helps. The Arab world is so homogeneous, they never see a Jew. So you tell them that they're bloodsuckers, listen, they're bloodsuckers.
Okay, but what about the Jewish, sorry, not just the Jewish people, but like the Arabs who live in Israel? You brought up a good point. I did a film many years back about, it was called Disengaged from Reality, about Arabs living in Israel and how, you know, they would prefer to live in Israel than under any Arab ruling. However, when you're looking at the news, you're seeing like during any situation, Palestinian flags in Tel Aviv. You're hearing the rhetoric. You're seeing it in Israeli parliament. You know, people who are bluntly anti-Semitic, bluntly anti-Israel, and yet they have a voice. And, you know, if you're looking right now at the Israeli elections, I mean, the left received almost 50%. And that's
the left. Yeah, the left.
Oh, meaning the left of Bibi received 50%. Okay, how about there were 15 seats?
Yeah.
15 seats for the Arab side. Now,
yeah, that's amazing.
Giving them a voice, but not when the voice is anti-Israel. Meaning, even if I disagree with someone in Canadian Parliament, whether it be Liberal, Green Party, whatever it may be, if they started being anti-Canadian, that's
treason
on the line. It's anti-party. It's being anti-Canadian, bluntly.
The line is treason.
But that's the thing, that it's almost like we are too nice. We're allowing people to step on us. We're allowing this to happen, as opposed to having somebody stronger. You know, I remember I grew up during the days of Begin, you know, who, you know, who would have seen, if he would have seen that Biden was trying to become president, he would have probably died a second time, you know? So we're seeing a real shift where we're allowing anti-Semitism to come back because of free speech, because we don't want to rock the boat.
We've come full circle.
We seem like the good guy.
Yeah, and we've come full circle in the conversation. It's true, but we're too good for our own good. But at the end of the day, that's a hard one. Like, I still err on the side of free speech.
But nobody here is against free speech. Like, but we just need to kind of reevaluate, in my opinion. Now, I may be talking smack, and someone would say, no, Ron, that is against anti-speech. But for me, it would be, once you start to say, you know, like, this person's a racist, and, you know, you start to use this type of language that is very hurtful, that it's not really talking about issue by issue, it could create a lot of different problems. And I mean,
problems.
Well, the Nazis or the Germans during World War II, or even before, many of them were not anti-Jewish. They weren't, but they, you know, if you keep hearing it over and over and over and over again as a part of free speech, you start to believe it. Many Germans never thought that I'm an Aryan and I'm superior. But if you start telling me I'm an Aryan, I'm superior, I should have this Jewish person's house or his business or his money or what's his business here, then I will fall into trap, and I can't be blamed. The government told me this. So somebody needs to step in and say, enough is enough.
I think critical thinking skills is a required skill in this day and age. I think it's a little bit of a tangent, but I honestly believe that would help in a lot of issues. A lot of people are making a big fuss about misinformation on the internet now too, right? I'd prefer people to have critical thinking skills rather than Mark Zuckerberg decide for them. So I mean that's a matter of critical thinking, right? So if you go back to what you were saying about the Arab parties, right? Is it anti-speech? If you're an Arab in Israel, a citizen, right? And I don't know, you believe in whatever, the Arab parties sell, right? And you ban them. They can technically say that you're against their political expression, right? That's why that's considered speech. So I want to go back to that.
No, but again, if we had someone in Canadian Parliament say things that are anti-Canada, and by the way, we are seeing this. We are seeing
Yes.
people who want to bring down statues of John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Israel,
Yes.
of Canada. We have people who are like in the States who are against Columbus did, sort of like rewriting.
He kept slaves.
Right, and we sort of understand that, like, hey, this is a little bit crazy. Like, this was a different time. We can't really go back. Like, we're honoring them for different things. Even Mahatma Gandhi used to beat up his wife and was anti-black and was hanging out with young women, yet we're seeing him as a peacekeeper. Everybody's got skeletons in their closet, but like we can't start breaking down every single person. However, there are things that we can do. When we're seeing blunt anti-Semitism, when we're seeing people calling them rats, monkeys, cockroaches, or let's get their names, we're noticing that there's going to become a shift where it's going to be even more dangerous. Now, it's one thing if it's coming from a mob of people, you can't really stop it. It's another thing when it's coming from the government. And so my question to you before we end off, what can we do to stop anti-Semitism on the more parliamentary level?
Cool. In Canada?
In the world.
On a parliamentary level. That's tough because then you get into legislation of anti-Semitism. It's the only way you can do that. And then as soon as you do that, right, you start getting into like, okay, so what am I allowed to say about Jews and what aren't I allowed to say about Jews, right?
Didn't Germany do that after World War II, where they had to teach it? The people who were guilty of it were the ones who were moving forward. And in my opinion, the Germans did a much better job than any other European country when it came to that. And they need to get credit for this. So if Germany was supposed to change, why can't the world or Israel put that pressure and say, look, you keep wanting to boycott us for everything we're doing. We're going to boycott you if you don't change the books, if you stop calling us by these names, if you don't change the education. Like even in the Arab world, you still have people who are studying protocols of Zion.
Oh, yeah. Listen, even amongst our peace partners, I've seen the Egyptian and Jordanian textbooks. I couldn't believe it. This is like years after peace. Like, it's great. This is the awesome peace we have. Like, they're still learning that, like, took it over. Some of them are still learning that we're animals. It's kind of scary, but what can you do? So I have mixed feelings about what Germany did. Like, I like that listen, most of my family went in the Holocaust. I kind of like that people can't deny it. But at the same time, the person in me that like values free speech, it kind of scares me. Because, like, where does that stop? And, mind you, listen, it's been how many years? Over 50 years there, and they haven't slipped down the slippery slope, right? That could be a fallacy, too, right? Slippery slope fallacy. You don't have to always slip down the slope. But, like, why should it be a crime to say the Holocaust didn't happen? People aren't like, listen, I don't like that view. I don't think, but why should that be a crime to say it? Like, and the ultimate question in that is who becomes the ultimate kind of arbiter of what is true and what is not. Like that one's black and white.
But yeah, you brought something that's a little bit black and white in terms of like the Holocaust theory that happened.
That one is kind of black and white.
But it has to do with your influence, right?
Right.
If you're someone of stature in parliament or whatever it is, and you have followers, I mean, it's a slippery slope to be able to get back to where we were 75 years ago. So you need to stop it when you're seeing that it's dangerous. Like you can be, I mean, don't get me wrong, no one is preaching being anti-black, anti-Jew in the United States or any of that type of stuff. It does happen. But once you're seeing this types of rhetoric on the streets, like right now, you can have a debate about the Mexican border, right? You can have the debate about the wall. But once you start to talk about Mexicans as a whole or Mexican Americans, you're sort of passing that line. So there needs to be something said about, hey, this goes beyond free.
That I agree. Listen, I agree, and you should always say it.
about the people coming from Mexico. Now, do I agree that Trump said, you know, that we're getting rapists and gang members from Mexico? I mean, as much as there is some truth to it, not every person is coming to America because they want to become gang members and rapists. But there needs to be a line, and that's really where I think you and I differ. You believe that free speech should be free speech, and I feel like once you see a point where it's becoming anti other people and it's creating conflict and it's making your own citizens fear for their lives, I mean, there's no way that Ukrainian Jews are going to feel good being in Ukraine these days, even if they have a president who is Ukrainian. There's no way that the French Jewish people feel comfortable being there when there are streets that Arabs do not allow the regular citizens to walk through, or the same thing in England and Belgium and in Sweden, and I can go on and on. So to end this off, I want to know, do you feel there needs to be more action taken, not by the Jewish people, not by Israel, but by these countries, the representatives, that they should be preaching peace in the world as opposed to hatred, especially with countries or people they don't have a war with? You know,
absolutely.
Fighting a war with Israel, right?
Absolutely. Like, listen, I think they should all be doing that. I also don't think they should be haters. I'm not supporting it. I just don't think it should be legislated out. I do think it should be countered. Absolutely, it should be countered. Where I don't like it is where people go, okay, well, government becomes the ultimate decider of what you can and can't say. I mean, and more cliche examples. You know, sending your entire family or 2 generations of your family because your uncle made a joke about Stalin. You know, and that wasn't like people, oh, Stalin was crazy. No, that started also. He had everything in government usually starts from kind of good intentions. Like the way they saw things was that you know, the communal good over the independent good. So if you're making jokes, it's going to make this guy not like Stalin, and then communal cohesiveness would break. And through that kind of mindset, eventually you made a joke about Stalin and they'd send you to the gulag. I worry about stuff like that. I worry about like Canada with this whole thing about gender pronouns. I would do the exact same thing. Like if they were to come to me, like if I'm a professor in university and they come to me with a list of 16 pronouns, they go, you have to memorize this? Really? No.
I'm with you on this. I understand the point where you're coming from, but there's a little bit of a difference, and I'm going to be using like a negative word right now, and I apologize to the crowd that's listening, but let's just say I use the word retard, okay, about someone. And again, I just said, oh, I just call them by that, and it's a very negative word. I should know not to use it. But I'm not, it's not coming from also a place of violence. I'm not getting people routed up to go out and kill. There is a little bit of a difference. I mean, we can have a conversation about, you know, whether you want to call someone a female or a male or whatever gender X. We can have this discussion. But if we notice that because of this conversation, we're killing women or we're killing men or we're killing people with Down syndrome or whatever it may be, that's when we have to change things around. And it's moving.
Have you seen the claims? Have you seen the claims where they say misgendering me is tantamount to violence? Like, which to me is like, what?
Listen,
that's
I could say that you're raping me right now too. I could just say it, right? At the end of the day, you have to like say what does it mean. So meaning everybody has an opinion when it comes to it. But when you're no,
I just heard this one more than it wasn't just more than it was more than just one like crazy person. This one is one that
there's many crazy people out there. Clearly, but what I'm saying is, I think if it came down to violence, if it came down to like, you know, we have to kill all these types of people that believe,
that's a call to action.
Then I would say, look, that there's something needs to change here. But
that's a call to action. If you're saying go murder someone, that's a call to action. That's no longer speech. I think that's one thing the United States actually gets right. I might take that back. But no, you know what? I do think that's one thing that the United States gets right, is their free speech. And, you know, it's almost absolute.
I feel like our conversation today didn't really come up with any real solution to fixing, you know, anti-Semitism. I didn't really think that we will. Well, you know, because clearly we're going in circles trying to figure out what is freedom of speech, what it's not, you know, what is anti-Semitism. And the bottom line is, I feel personally, and this is what I want to end off with, is I feel once it gets to a point where it's about murdering people, it's about, there's nothing, like when someone's saying, call me by a different name, they're not asking for a war, right? It's like, Jewish people say, call me, it's like if I were to say, don't call the West Bank anymore. It's a West Bank of Jordan that was there from 1948 to 1967, and all of a sudden it becomes the West Bank, yet when it's Judea and Samaria, it's a conversation. It's merely words. But if the West Bank and the way we talk about the word was actually putting people's lives in danger, then we have to think about the words that we're using.
But what they're saying is use this word or you will have consequences. That is what they're saying. It's not just use this word, please. It's use this word or you're going to lose your job and you might have to face consequences with the government. That's a totally different story. That's where I get there. Listen, if it's just use this name, whatever. I'm going to call you Joe, you're Joe. It's you must use these pronouns, and if you don't, consequences. And consequences from the government. But that's scary.
Well, I want to thank you, Ben. I know that you do a lot of work online. I see your posts on a regular basis, getting in conversations with people and dialogue. Keep spreading the positive messages. At the end of the day, I think our job is to create that dialogue. I don't have people. We don't need to have people agreeing with us on a regular basis, but I think something that we, the normal people can agree on is that once it turns into violence or trying to hurt, like I don't think I'm anti-Palestinian at all. I don't think I'm anti, I may disagree with a lot of the tactics and some of the propaganda and, there's a lot of things, but as a people, I'm totally all right with the people and I hope that they would have a country one day. So, that could live safely next to Israel, but not on the bodies or the blood of my people. And I think that's really the difference. So I applaud you for, stepping up there and going into all these chat rooms and trying to make a difference. And I'm really hopeful that, protecting the free speech or all sorts of free speech is not going to bite us in the, in the future.
Yeah. Last thing to say is respect diversity of opinion, people. It's important. Even the vile crap, honestly, like respect diversity. That's for me, that's much more, diversity of opinion is so much more important than diversity of, I don't know, colors and genders. I don't know, growing up here, I don't really see colors. Another cliche, but I really don't. Like I see.
Well, like, again, you start to see the colors and race and all that when it hits the fan, or sort of like there is a divide where it's like, for example, when the cops are doing something to the black population, you cannot escape it. You can't say we're all the same because the bottom line is clearly, they're experiencing something different. And the same thing, we're experiencing something different as Jews. So there is a difference. I mean, our entire topic today happens to be about Jewish people. So if we see it like we're like everyone else, clearly we're not, but we should be okay with each other's differences. We should be okay with each other's opinions. But in my opinion, until it reaches a certain point, it's like me and you can have a conversation, but if you pull out a gun, you can't go, well,
No, I think, let me rephrase that. I prefer to see people's individual opinion and individual identity over their communal identity. I think part of the polarization now is people see people for their communal identity. You're left, therefore you believe this on this, this on that, this on this. You're right, therefore you believe this on this, this on this. Nobody's heterodox. That's the word of the week.
Agreed.
Very few people are like, and I think if you've thought about these issues, for most people, you have to be heterodox. It's so weird to me that like you're left, so I because you're left, I know your opinion on Israel, I know your opinion on China, and your opinion that doesn't make sense to me.
Absolutely.
Like, who thinks like that?
Unfortunately, today you're being put in spots like like I'm very socially inclined. Like I care about women's rights, gay rights, like their environment. Like I'm so much about that. But yeah, when it comes to defending the state, when it comes to like anti-Semitism, then to some people I may look like a right winger, and I'm okay with it. But I don't live by other people's words. I live by my own.
Yeah.
And I think that by doing so, it's why I am always pushing forward, and I'm not afraid of dialogue, and that's why I have shows like this to express my opinions and to have these conversations. I want to thank you, Ben, for really being a part of the show. I want you to continue to do the great work that you do. And even though we disagree on this issue, I think we're both on the same side when it comes to spreading positive messages, getting our opinions across, and hopefully making a positive change for the future of both our people. And what I mean by that, our people in the world.
As it should be.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time. I really, really appreciate it, Ben, and I look forward to some of your stuff on the Facebook.